All right, we are live. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's live webinar. I'm Rachel Nicastro, and I'm the Director of Marketing here at Music First, and I am thrilled to have a very special guest with us tonight, Rick Mendoza. Rick is the Associate Director of Bands at East Central High School in San Antonio, Texas. Welcome, Rick. Glad to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
In addition to his band ensembles, he teaches music theory and AP music theory courses, which is what we're going to be talking about tonight. He is one of our power users, and we've brought him in tonight to talk about how he uses notation software and digital audio workstation software like Flat and Soundtrap to enhance his music theory teaching. And he's going to kind of walk us through how he uses film scoring projects to teach core theory concepts with his students. And if you like what you see tonight, Rick's going to be featured on the Profiles in Teaching with Technology podcast on March 14th. So this Thursday, you can find that podcast on SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or on the musicfirst.com website. And I'm going to drop a link to those down in the description so that you can give it a listen. But without any further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Rick. If you have any questions during the webinar, you can pop them in the chat and we will get those answered for you. All right, so it's all you, Rick.
Thank you very much, Rachel. And thank you to everyone at Music First for inviting me to do this. So I'll just tell you a little background about what we're talking about today. I recently presented a longer version of this at the Texas Music Educators Association and had a lot of great feedback from it. And I've been asked to do it in different formats. And so that's what we're doing here today. We're talking about composing with technology. I started a few years back in my music theory classes, gearing them more towards actual composition and less about the long theoretical processes. And what that led to over time was us obviously writing on paper, but as I started to learn more about things like Flat that we'll talk about soon in Soundtrap, we started incorporating those a lot more. So today the bulk of what you're going to see is student work in Flat with a little bit in Soundtrap as well. So I just want to show you quickly. In terms of composition, I kind of give my students little guidelines for writing melodies. That's really what we start with about halfway through the year is melody writing with emphasis on just keeping things as simple as possible. And we spend a lot of time throughout the year on listening skills, oral skills, with the constant reminder that this is going to help them when they're writing melodies or really just writing music in general. So I want them to have the ability to hear something in their head, have an idea, and be able to somewhat easily reproduce it because they have those skills, as opposed to just throwing them in there and having them plug in note by note on a computer and listening to what it is one note at a time. I find that they get very caught up in the smallest little details when they're doing that. And if they have some kind of idea ahead of the time, it makes the process go by a little bit faster. So let's start by showing you some work in Flat. One of the first things that I do with my students is I have them I'm pulling it up here. I have them take work that they've already done on paper and input that into Flat. And so the reason that I like to do that is because the creative part is already done, it's already out of the way, and they can simply focus on the software and the interface and getting familiar with that. And one of the things that I like about Flat is that you can add or remove any tools that you want the students to have. And so the first few times that they're getting into this, I limit a lot of the tools that they have just so they can really focus on how to input notation. And as time goes by, we add more and more and more. So this is just a simple example of something that a student wrote down on paper and then transferred into Flat. And it's one of the first assignments that they do. They're just getting familiar with writing out ideas over basic block chords. So here this is. So let me start that from the beginning.
I think we need to reshare the audio.
Okay. Pull it up. And so one of the things that the students hear me say quite often, especially early on in the process, is it's not the greatest thing in the world. It's not gonna change anybody's musical life, but it sounds pleasant. And we follow those guidelines and we can always write something that sounds good. And then we expand upon that over time. Um, and you'll see that in a moment. You'll see some more advanced concepts of that. One of the other things that I like about Flat that I don't have to show you today, but is that you can give them an assignment based on one of your own scores. So if you want to write out a bass line or write out some type of chords, and you can basically share that with them as an assignment like you would do on Google. And they each get a copy of that score and then they fill in their notation on top of that. Next, I want to show you an example. One of our final projects, I usually kind of give them an option, videos, which you'll see in just a moment, or just plain composition in flat. Most of them kind of gravitate towards videos and using other types of media, but every now and then I have some that just really want to write something notation-wise, and they're happy with that. And this one is from a student who had no musical background, didn't read music, didn't play an instrument, nothing like that. But he wrote something which I think is kind of cool. This was piano, drum set, violin, cello, electric bass, vibraphone. And let me share this with you. This one's a little bit long, so I'm not going to play the whole thing, but you can kind of get an idea for what students are capable of, even though they're not spending the entire school year learning the theoretical aspects. Sorry, let me start that again. I tried to give you more screen. And so, as I've said lots of times when I show that one to other teachers, I say we could probably sit down and put our glasses on and really nitpick at certain things that they are or are not doing. But instead, we can really take a deeper view and assessed that this student, which knew nothing about music, has been kind of pulled in because of the technology that's involved. And if we had students like that just simply writing on paper with pencil, they probably wouldn't be as engaged. The next thing I want to show you is this was a student who was in one of my AP music theory classes, played piano, and wrote this for an assignment. And then it goes back to the initial A section shortly after that. Let me pause for a moment to answer a couple of questions that I have in here. I see a question about schedule for classes. I see my classes every day. It's approximately 45-ish minutes or so, but it's every day. And in terms of doing their work in class, they do a bulk of it in class. I don't know if you know this, but lots of students don't do work at home. So I try to kind of make it all in class. But I have found that with using Flat and using the technology, I have a lot more students that will go home and log in on their phone, or if they have a laptop or Chromebook at home, and actually do some work, much more than go home and write out these 16 measures or so. So I have found that the technology does kind of help them do some stuff at home because they can do it on their phone, they can do it on a tablet or whatever. So now I also want to tell you, I can switch to my next tab. When I'm giving them assignments, and I'm sure most of y'all know this, but I would recommend it. It's very tempting with the technology aspect to just give it to them and let them go. I strongly recommend keeping things structured as you would do for everything else. Giving them either checkpoints. Today you're just writing a melody, tomorrow you're writing a bass line, something like that. Instead of just letting them go, because they will obsess over the smallest little thing. And I find that if they have something to kind of work towards that small goal for the day or the week, just like for any other assignment, that tends to work best. So the next one I want to show you is a student. This one is for oboe, piano, glockenspiel, and cello. And I feel like this was a good example of this student's, I guess, musical identity at the time. She was a percussionist who was learning to play piano. She was taking piano classes and was also learning to play oboe as a secondary instrument in band. And so she wrote a piece for those three instruments with cello. goes back to an A section. And so you can see kind of the progression from students just writing very basic limited melodies over blocked chords to writing for multiple instruments. And yes, I've been using flat for years. And during the pandemic, I think that was my second year of using flat. And so it was a pretty easy transition for the kids to continue writing on their projects at home. So we're getting to the last of my flat examples. One of the great things about flat is that it allows you to collaborate. So you can have collaborative scores. And I will caution that sometimes if you have multiple, like an entire class collaborating on a score, that can be a little tricky. We've had arguments about people changing my notes and things like that. So for small groups, collaborating on a score is really fantastic. But one of my favorite ones was not even an assignment. It was students that were done with their final project, and they asked me if they could write something else together. And I said, sure. And they said, but like not for a grade. And I said, yeah, go write music, have a great time. And so they shared it with me at the end. And so the background on this, just make sure I'm sharing the right one with you. The background on this, you can't see the title on it, I think, but it's called A Day in Paris. They wrote this about the French Revolution for some reason. This is harp, piano, tambourine. And this was, I think, 3 or 4 students that all shared the score with each other, and you can work on it similar to a Google Doc. In real time, you're seeing what the other person is notating from their end. It has lyrics in the harp for some reason, and I think the lyrics are the best part. And so that's a good example of just them being excited about what they're doing. And like I said, it's because of technology. If they were all sitting together with copies of staff paper, writing together, we wouldn't have gotten things like that. So I'm going to transition a little bit to Soundtrap. So Soundtrap, if you don't know, is a digital audio workstation. It's integrated with all the Music First technologies. But one of the great things about it is that you obviously don't have to notate anything if that's not your game. We do a lot of assignments where students will notate a portion of what they're doing in flat and upload it into Soundtrap, then use other loops and things like that. So combining the two, and just another way to get them using multiple medias at the same time. So I'm going to start with, let's see, I'm going to start with this one. So we have a couple of video assignments that I do with my students, basically like scoring short films. And so what I do is I just take short silent films so we don't have to worry about the dialogue, and I just strip out whatever audio may or may not be in there, and then they have to score the film. And like I said, sometimes there are requirements. You have to compose a portion in flat and stuff like that. But for the most part, we're getting to the end of the year, and they pretty much know what they're doing, and we can be a little more loose with what they have to do. So this is a short film that I took that this student actually composed entirely in flat, and then just added one or two little sound effects in Soundtrap.
I think we need to reshare the audio again.
Okay. There we go.
We're not hearing any audio yet. I think what you'll need to do is just share it as a tab.
Okay, let me try one more time. I think I fixed it. Sorry about that. And yes, to answer the question in the chat, yeah, so we're getting into some of these non-composition based things that they do. Sorry, that's my next one. Okay, one more time. Okay, sorry for the trouble with that one, but I think you caught it at the end. So yes, they do add sound effects as well. And most of the time, I don't even have to bring up sound effects. Like, they're obsessed with looking up sound effects on Soundtrap. Occasionally they'll record some on their own. So a good example of sound effects is this next one. As far as videos go, this is one of my two favorites. You'll see the other one in a moment. And we'll talk about the sound effect. Everything you hear written in flat. And so that was all, as I said, composed in Flat, uploaded into Soundtrap, really just for that one little sound effect at the end that this student just obsessed over for days because they couldn't get the right pitch of that sound that you heard. So good question. How do you assess the students? Honestly, most of the theoretical assessment has been done by this point. So we've done a lot of the written stuff. We do about maybe 3 written exams throughout the year, which includes a lot of listening assessment. When we're at this point, we're basically just at the point of completion of the project and keeping on that timeline. But I will say the first time that I started doing more tech stuff like this, I did want to have something on paper as far as assessment goes, because I wasn't sure how it was going to go. And I don't have it to share with you, but I basically just kind of made a checklist, and it was about 10 different items. So for example, are you using minimum of 2 loops? Is the assignment meet the minimum time requirement or measure requirement? Just a checklist of a few different items that was very simple to just sit with the student and say, you completed this portion, yes or no. And that was an easy way to assess them from the start. And really, they're doing it on their own. They're checking off stuff on the sheet, and they have the option of going back and tweaking anything that didn't meet the requirements. Good question. I'll get to my last 2 here on Soundtrap, and then see if you have any other questions. Let's see. So another assignment that I like is I find videos of book read-alongs on YouTube and strip the audio. And so then the students have to not only compose music for it, but they can also add sound effects if they want. But on top of that, they have to record themselves or someone else reading the story as well. So it adds a third layer of them being involved with the microphone and using that aspect of it. So this one was the video Brown Bear. And this was the same student that I mentioned earlier that had no musical background, didn't read music, nothing at all. There is no composition in Flat on this one. This is all purely Soundtrap. Make sure I'm ready for this one. Okay.
We'll need we need another reshare of the audio.
I'm going to pause for a minute to load that again. And as I'm loading that up one more time, I want to mention that this was a student who sat in the back of class, did his work. He was really quiet, didn't talk a whole lot. And now he's doing all these voices. And he's just doing all this great stuff that he wouldn't have done without this technology. Okay, let me try this again.
Brown bear, what do you see?
I see a red bird looking at me.
Red bird, what do you see?
Ah,
I see a yellow duck looking at me. Yellow duck, what do you see? I see a blue horse looking at me. Blue horse, what do you see?
I see a green frog looking at me.
Green frog, what do you see? I see a purple cat looking at me. Purple cat, what do you see?
And I will tell you, I took this home to my 3-year-old at the time, and he
I see a
loved it.
white dog looking at me. White dog, what do you see?
So that one is a little bit long, but you kind of get the idea. And there are so many different other things that you could do utilizing this. The next one that I came up with that was kind of just for my own personal amusement was having students write music for a commercial. And so I gave them an image as kind of inspiration. And I told them, your task is to write music for a commercial for some made up pharmaceutical that I invented on the spot. And I gave them a few guidelines for what they had to incorporate. And so one of those was like a fade in, fade out. It had to be a strict 60-second cut. And I think it was like a minimum of 3 different, not necessarily instruments, but tracks or loops that they had to use. And oops, sign in real quick. Logged me out. And so I got a few good things. By far the best one, again, somehow was a student that didn't have the musical background. And sometimes I think we obsess a lot over the theoretical aspect, and we kind of ignore the creativity side. Just give me a second for my screen to load again. Another question here while I'm loading. Do students see one another's work? Yes. And that's the cool part, is that I can put this up on a screen. And once we're done with every assignment, we look at everything that everyone is doing, and we talk about it, and we kind of assess what everybody's doing. And I really try, and as I'm pulling this up once more, I really try my best to encourage them to critique each other's work, because it's really easy for somebody else to sit there and look at things from a different perspective as opposed to the person who's writing it. Do you ever do a film festival with your students? No, but I'm actually going to talk about film in another aspect in just a moment. Sorry, I'm having trouble with this last one that I want to show. I think I'm getting close though. Okay, I think I've got it. So my goal, and I've had conversations, we have a teacher here at our school who teaches like an audio video class, and they do a lot of little short films and stuff that they do enter into festivals. And we've had talks next year about allowing some of our students to write music for those. So I'm hoping that does happen next year, but we are using them later on this year. He is giving me some films that they've written in the past, and he's pulling out all the audio and he's giving those to us as templates to use instead of me having to find things on YouTube, which is kind of nice. But we are kind of hoping to do something like that in the future. Okay, I think I've got it now. Okay, so this is, you're going to see the Soundtrap page. Now, I'm going to mute the read. So what I did was I created a read that was just purely for my own enjoyment. The audio on the read is really bad because I literally recorded it talking into my laptop right before the bell rang to start for class. But, so here this is, actually, I'll include the read, why not? It's funny. It's hard to hear, but it's funny.
For decades, parents have looked for a way to grow their children to unnecessarily large proportions. So many parents resorted to unusual and then who's got the time? Surely there's got to be a better way. Well, now there is. Introducing Enhedral. Enhedral is a small triangular pill taken just once per hour. Children who took it will age those who received the placebo. Side effects of Enhedral include nausea, heartburn, indigestion, and bleeding of the elbows. In rare cases, some children suffer loss of fingernails. Don't get stuck in a rut of nutrition and exercise. Ask your doctor if Enhedral is right for you.
So we as a class collectively decided that the new drug was for child enlargement. And so I came up with the read for that. But this year I'm having them come up with their own. That way nobody can complain about me. But that was probably one of the best ones that we had. And you can see as I'm kind of scrolling through here, how many different things that he used. And you can see it with these shaded areas, little effects that he added, fading in and out and stuff like that. So a lot of work went into this. And these assignments are maybe about 3 days to a week, depending on what they're doing. So it really, in the big scheme of things, doesn't take a long time for them to finish these types of things because they're really engaged with what they're doing. Now, next, let me close that one up. I think I've got one last thing to show you. Just double checking. And so going back to flat for just a moment, one of the things that, oops, sorry. Pause for a moment. One of the things that I forgot to mention earlier was somebody was asking about a film festival in the comments. We do a little composition contest that we do. When I had multiple classes of this, we would kind of take the best ones, and I would put them all together, and I would play them for all the different band, choir classes and stuff. And there was a form that kids would fill out, and they'd pick the winner. And so one of the things that the winner got was they had their picture framed, and there's a little QR code that links it to the play along on YouTube, and that's framed in our performing arts building. And so this is the most recent one. We weren't able to do this last year, but this is our most recent one, still on YouTube. can see the words underneath. So that was our most recent winner, and that student actually won a few little awards for that one as well. Question, do I teach them to mix? So I haven't done that yet, and really just because last year was the first year that we really incorporated Soundtrap so much into what we were doing. So a lot of it was still new to me. I've made it a point to kind of get a little more familiar with that. So I'm hoping to do that in the future. We've had talks of creating a digital music and sound production class. And if we're able to do that in the future, that would probably be where the majority of that comes into. So sort of a lead into what that would be, hopefully, eventually. And I think that's the last one that I had to show everybody. So kind of just a few, hopefully, takeaways for everybody is that you don't have to be a tech expert, and you don't have to totally change what you're doing in your class. Even if you're not seeing your students every day, these are things that you can easily incorporate, not just from the aspect of teacher knowledge of how to work this, but from a cost standpoint, it's pretty cost friendly to incorporate these things into your routine. I mean, it's relatively inexpensive per student, no matter how you're doing it. So there really isn't a reason to incorporate more technology into music theory. I think a lot of music theory gets stuck in whatever time period, hundreds of years ago. And so I think for kids, it's really cool to see something in the now. Also, one more thing about flat. A lot of other notation programs, yes, you can see what is notated on the screen, you can play it back. But the interface is just so user-friendly. It's kind of funny for me when I'm walking them through it the first time. And every now and then I just purposely don't tell them one little key piece of information, and I watch them kind of moving notes up and down and clicking and clicking and clicking. And then I'll say, hey, what note do you want? And they'll say C. Hit C on the keyboard. Boom, there it is. And their eyes just it's that easy. And so it's really easy for them to use. In addition to that, like I tell them all the time, if there's a question that I can't get to in the moment, that help screen on flat is really, really great. One more thing, you can also make worksheets or little quizzes on flat. Those kind of get us through the year and keep me from having to make copies, keep me from having to grade things because it'll do it for you. So there are so many other things that you can do on flat. There are so many templates that you can do. Yes, music snippet and Google Docs, thank you. And Soundtrap as well. There are so many things that you can do with it. Soundtrap has lesson plans. They are all created by educators. And I will tell you, even if you don't actually use the lesson plans, I go to them a lot to give me ideas for other things to do. So there are plenty of lesson plans that I have opened up in Soundtrap, and then just kind of stole it and changed it to make it my own. So even if you are totally new to this, there are so many things that are embedded into the programs themselves to guide you through the process. So I'm going to take a look at questions for a moment, see if we have anything else in here. I think I've answered pretty much all the questions.
Yeah, I think that's everything. Thank you so much. This was amazing. I love hearing what you're doing with your students. I mean, it's just incredibly cool, bringing music theory into modern times. And I especially love the projects that you're doing that encourage that real-time collaboration. I mean, I think that's amazing. But thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to be with us. And please give your students our congratulations. The work that they've made is incredible. And for those of you who are watching the stream, come back to listen to the Profiles in Teaching with Technology podcast on Thursday. You can find it on musicverse.com. And if you want to try any of the software that Rick talked about in the webinar, you can just go to musicfirst.com/free-trial, and that will get you a free 30-day trial to Music First Classroom, Flat, and Soundtrap, among other pieces of software. So thank you all so much and have a great night.
Thank you.